You know, I have a feeling this is gonna really kill my credibility. So for those of you who know anything about me, I have some pretty strong opinions that I tend to have a problem keeping to myself. This might be one of my hotter takes. It's one of the ones that when I tell people it, they go like, what the fuck? I don't like A Link to the Past. Honestly, every 2D Zelda I've ever played, I didn't like. Some accuse me of being overly critical. Others accuse me of not liking anything. Some even call me a video game hipster. I am here to put those ideas to rest with a list of my personal top 20 games of all time. Now, this is just my subjective opinion on the games I like the most. If I say that I think Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue for the PS1 is the greatest game ever made, and you happen to hate fun, we can agree to disagree. Now with that out of the way, it's time for River's absolutely, definitely not changing all the time list of my top 20 favorite games of all time. Number 20. This game is about cool robots and making them fight each other. Custom Robo isn't the deepest game in the world, and it doesn't really need to be. You control the most 2006 anime protagonist that I have ever seen. He is a struggling bounty hunter who fights criminals in a world confined under a big-ass dome. What makes this game so fun is the customizability. Every aspect of your robot you can customize. The gun, your shoes, even your entire body. Throughout the game, you collect a bunch of different pieces from the enemies you beat. I'm pretty sure you just download their code or compile data or something like that, but I like to imagine that you're just ripping the feet off of a bot you just beat. But with all of these bits and bobs, there's tons of weapons and attachments with different attributes to mix and match to create your own unique robot. You've got the big tanky models that hit hard but move slow as shit. You've got the small agile ones who will die to a strong gust of wind. All the way to... Dude, what the fuck? It's just a face! What the hell? No, I'm not okay. No, I'm not okay. This is not okay. Next entry. Number 19. So one thing you'll learn pretty quickly about me is that I love RPGs. They're easily my favorite genre, and I am a sucker for a good fantasy RPG. Dragon Age Origins is probably one of the best fantasy RPGs I've ever played, and easily BioWare's best video game, back when BioWare still made good video games. Dragon Age feels like a high fantasy Dungeons & Dragons campaign, but in video game form. The dialogue system is top-notch. The writing is fantastic with some of the funniest conversations I've ever experienced in a video game.
Oh, is that so? You could just be listening to the tone of my voice. You could be an utter moron for all we know. Hey now.
The roster of party members you can recruit is absolutely stacked. You've got the funny guy paladin with Alistair. You have the hot goth witch of the wilds Morrigan that definitely didn't foster a thing within me for alt witch girls. The most carefree assassin orphan that grew up in a brothel I've ever seen was Zevran. A literal good boy, and my personal favorite, Shale. The hilarious golem that has a burning hatred for pigeons. In classic BioWare fashion, throughout the game you have to make a lot of tough decisions and deal with the consequences of them. The amount of branching paths in this game is kind of ridiculous. Some of these can result in the deaths or even the possessions of important characters and children. But look, it was an adorable cat asking me to free it. It's not like I could just say no. I mean, come on, it's a cat. I'm absolved of all guilt, and we are going to move on to the next entry with absolutely no further discussion. It's a cat, come on. Number 18. We're going to take a bit of a turn in tone and talk about a game that at one point held a world record. That's right, the video game that was once known as having the most F-bombs in it of any video game, Mafia II. Mafia comes from a time in video games where there was a lot of, how do I put this delicately? An ungodly amount of Grand Theft Auto clones. Around this time, a lot of people were trying to bite Grand Theft Auto's shit. Some did it better than others, being distinct enough to establish themselves as their own video games. I want to give a special shout out to honorable mention Sleeping Dogs, a great game that almost made the list. And then there were some that were... And then some were True Crime LA, and less said about that game, the better. What set Mafia apart, and especially Mafia 2, was the classy setting of the Italian mob in legally distinct, not New York, in the 30s and 40s. You had that classic gangster flair with some really compelling character work. Vito is a slick protagonist that can rock a nice fedora, and Joe made for some good comedic relief, but also some really emotional moments too. While the gameplay is nothing to write mama about, the setting, the characters, and the story really carry this game. There were some real twists and turns in the story that I definitely was not expecting, plus a real gut punch of an ending. Coming in with number 17. So aside from video games, my other big obsession is music. I'm almost always listening to music. And it's a bit embarrassing to admit, but when I was younger, I thought all metal music was just screamo hardcore stuff. The game Brutal Legend helped me realize just how diverse heavy metal music really is. I wouldn't really call myself a metalhead. I just enjoyed the classics like Black Sabbath and Motorhead, both of which are in this game. My experience with Brutal Legend as a kid was interesting. Growing up, I experienced the swan song of video rental stores and the death of Blockbuster. In their dying throes, my local Blockbuster did this thing where when you rented a game, if you liked it, you could keep it, and then the next time you went into the store, you'd be able to pay off the remaining retail cost, minus the rental fee, and just own the game. So I did that with Brutal Legend, except I never went back. Very soon after, that Blockbuster closed and became a yoga studio. Oops. To get back to the game, everything about it is slick. It's got that classic Tim Schafer style, and it takes place in a world where the environments are based off of classic metal album cover art, and an absolutely stacked voice cast. You got Jack Black as the main character, Ozzy Osbourne as the Guardian of Metal.
You look fucking terrible.
Wait, what do I have to do for a fire tribute?
Please the fucking gods of metal, man. Figure it out.
Right, okay. I'll be back soon, covered in metal god love.
Oh, God.
Rob Halford as a fire biker dude, and General Lionwhite, the first major antagonist you face in the game. And Lemmy Kilmeister as a healer who heals you with the deep grooves of bass. The soundtrack to this game is amazing and filled to the brim with classic pieces of metal music, and some more modern, at least at the time, tracks too. It was so cool driving a hot rod through a collapsing building while Through the Fire and the Flames was blasting. The gameplay was great too. It's got some of that good action hack and slash with an axe, and the ability to combo into shredding on a guitar to electrocute or set your enemies on fire. It was also mixed with a kind of weird RTS stage battle thing, which was fine, but the overall package was a damn good time. Number 16. Whenever someone asks me if I could only ever play one game for the rest of my life, I've always had the same answer. It would be tempting to pick one of the games higher up on this list, but I'd eventually get sick of them since most of them are quite linear. No, the only answer I always give is The Sims 3. The completely open-ended nature of this game offers endless amounts of hours to have fun and play around, as this game is different every time. Sometimes I'll do a bachelor run where I start off single, sad, and alone with basically nothing and try to become filthy rich. Other times, I'll do a multi-generational family run, or I'll do a run where I try to support myself entirely off of writing or making sculptures as a starving artist. Once I lived entirely off of what I could steal as a kleptomaniac. I got arrested. A lot. No matter what kind of run I am doing, I am going to always be able to sink a ton of hours into this game, as evidenced by the fact I have 836 hours in this game. Oh my fucking god. What? Number 15. So for a while in my teenage life, I wanted to be a lawyer. Specifically, I wanted to be a prosecutor, and it was almost entirely because of how much I love this next entry. The original Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney trilogy are easily my favorite games on the DS. I first found them when I inherited my older brother's R4, which was this thing that you could load totally legitimate games onto and play them on your DS. I immediately fell in love with these games. They're well written, clever, and just the right amount of stupid to create the best gaming experience I've ever had playing as a lawyer. Trust me, as a criminologist, the law can be really boring sometimes, but this game makes it feel like an adventure. Some of the cases go really off the rails. There's a part where you cross-examine a parrot, and the best part is that it's taken completely seriously and is actually vital to the plot. It's that classic point-and-click gameplay mixed with a logic component where you have to listen to testimony and find the inconsistencies between what they're saying and the evidence you collected during the point-and-click segments. It's just hard enough to be decently head-scratching without being obtuse enough where I ever had to throw my DS down and just look up the answer. It's really satisfying to find the lie in someone's testimony and watch as they have an emotional breakdown right there on the stand. Trials and Tribulations is my personal favorite, as has Godot, who is my favorite character in the whole series and has one of the best character themes in all of video games. Number 14. Aside from RPGs, my other most played genre is probably life simulation games. I love the slow-paced, open-ended nature of life simulation games. Within life sim games, there is a particular subgenre that I adore, the farming sim. Growing up, I played the ever-loving fuck out of farming sim games like Rune Factory and Harvest Moon. And Stardew Valley is a modern love letter to these two game series in particular. It's got all the hallmarks of a farming life sim. Some relative of yours dies, and lucky for you, he has property. You move out of the big city away from a soul-sucking corporate job to go work on a farm in a small local rural valley community that I'm like 60% sure is a cult. But the people are great, and you get to date them. There's someone for everyone. The cute teacher girl, the brooding goth guy with a motorcycle, the hot blonde, the alt gamer girl who eats rocks. It's got it all. Stardew Valley doesn't do anything particularly revolutionary with its gameplay, as it wears its influences very much on its sleeve. Within the game, there is technically a goal you are striving towards with rebuilding the community center, but the game will continue even after that is finished. What keeps this game fun for me over all these years is the dedicated developer who provides a ton of content updates and the thriving modding community that has produced some amazing mods that add just so much to the game. Number 13. Now for this next entry, I actually came into it on the second game and I've never actually played the first one. That being said, I absolutely love Kingdom Hearts 2. I first played it on my older brother's PlayStation 2 that he had bought and intended to keep for himself, but me being the younger sibling, I strategically cried to our mother, so he ended up being forced to share it with me. As he was 5 years older than me, he was buying games that I probably shouldn't have been playing as an 11-year-old kid, but we'll get into that later. As I said, Kingdom Hearts 2 was my introduction to the Kingdom Hearts series. That's right, I skipped Kingdom Hearts 1 and Chain of Memories, so when I booted up the game as this random blonde guy who was super excited about summer vacation, I didn't see an issue with anything, as I had no prior knowledge of this game series. Then, after suffering through a brutally slow opening sequence, where I had to do part-time jobs and fight Vivi from Final Fantasy, shit started getting wild, where I found out that Roxas is the nobody, whatever that is, for this guy Sora, whoever that is. And before I have the opportunity to go, what the fuck is going on? We're in a gummy ship and we're exploring classic Disney movies and Pirates of the Caribbean, so it's not like I was about to question anything. Side note, I loved Roxas and Axel's dynamic, and while it's not the most popular entry in the series, I loved 358 over 2 days, and I adore Xion. Now, I'm not even gonna try to explain the plot of this game or this series, but some bad guy organization is going around collecting hearts so that they can be fully human, and that's bad because everything needs a heart, obviously, but it's not a physical heart. It's more like a spiritual something. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. But I can be in Tron and fight Sephiroth, so I don't care. Number 12. Shifting away from the absolute clusterfuck that is the story of Kingdom Hearts, we're going to move on to one of my personal favorite PS2 games. Shadow of the Colossus highlights that you don't need a goddamn thesis of a story to be amazing. It has one of the most bare-bones stories, and that's all that it needs. Your girlfriend is dead, go kill some big-ass motherfuckers to bring her back to life. That's it. Good luck. This game's core gameplay loop is basically a giant boss rush. You go from point A to point B, admire some scenery along the way, and then fight giant fuck-off monsters. For me, the fun of this game is figuring out how each fight works. It's almost like a puzzle game. I gotta figure out how to kill them before they kill me. Early on, it's as simple as stab guy in leg, he fall, now you can climb and murder. As you progress through the game, the fights get more and more grandiose and complicated. There'll be moments where you're flying through the air on an absolute unit of a sand snake thing, fighting a giant spider in a geyser field, to climbing something the size of a goddamn skyscraper. The gameplay is built around a physics-based system that highlights just how small you are compared to the Colossi. You're just a little bug climbing around on their fur, and when they swing themselves around trying to get you off, that sounded wrong. When they swing you around to try to get you to stop climbing them, you really feel it. Some have complained that the physics-based nature of the gameplay makes it difficult to control, but I don't agree with that. To me, it makes it so much more immersive that I get sent flying when a giant stone sword hits the ground next to me. What I love about Shadow of the Colossus, out of any other game on this list, it is the one that scratches my goopy gamer goblin brain the most. It is pure gameplay, and I love it. Number 11. So for this next entry, we're going to move up a couple generations and talk about the PS3 and the PS4. Some of my favorite PS3 games were the Infamous games and other games kind of similar to that, like Prototype. I love Sucker Punch games and have sunk so many hours into Infamous Second Son, which as an aside, they gotta make another Infamous game. Like, come on, Sucker Punch, don't let that series just collect dust. That being said, when Ghost of Tsushima was released, I found myself not particularly interested in it for whatever reason. I love games based in feudal Japan, and sure, samurais are a little played out and over-romanticized. They're still cool as fuck, but I don't know. I just didn't feel an urge to play it. Then a few months later, I was looking around my game shop looking for a new game to play, and I saw it. I decided, why not? I like Sucker Punch games, and boy am I glad I finally picked it up. This game is fantastic. It's basically an Akira Kurosawa film in video game form. I specifically played it with Japanese voice acting, which really helped give it that Akira Kurosawa feel to it. The gameplay is quite solid and flows really well. The various enemy types and stances that you can cycle through in the heat of battle made combat really satisfying and varied, but at the same time, I liked the option to be stealthy, as I enjoyed going through outposts trying to be as quiet as possible. But then sometimes I'll see a group of Mongols on the road, and I really love being able to just walk up to them, challenge them, and just cut them to pieces. The gameplay really made me feel like a badass samurai warrior. The island of Tsushima is breathtaking, and in classic Sucker Punch fashion, there was a shit ton of collectibles all over the map that I spent dozens of hours hunting down, which really encouraged exploration. I want to give a particular mention to the shrines in this game because they gave some absolutely breathtaking views. The entire visual presentation of this game is goddamn beautiful. Number 10. Growing up, I had a bunch of different interests. One of them was an absolute obsession with Greek mythology. I still vividly remember in the 4th grade, we had this thing called free reading time where the teacher would wheel in a big ass bookshelf and we would all pick a book to read for the next half hour. While all my classmates were fighting over Goosebumps and Magic Treehouse books, I would take this anthology encyclopedia thing on Greek mythology and monsters. I was obsessed with this book and would read it every single free reading time. It even got to the point where my teacher came up to me and asked me, "Don't you want to read something more suited to your age?" I didn't care if these stories were well above my reading level. They were fascinating and I loved reading them. I read them all. I read the story of Narcissus, Sisyphus, the Trojan War, the kidnapping of Persephone, Hercules' labors. I read them all. So when Hades, a video game based entirely in Greek mythology, came out, it seemed like a match made in heaven. But there was one hiccup. I don't like roguelikes. I don't know why, but something about the core gameplay loop of roguelikes mixed with an isometric camera angle never interested me. But the Greek mythology skin that Hades came in was enough to motivate me to give it a shot. And damn, I know I said I ain't a fan of roguelikes, but Hades is the exception. Not only does the game look and sound amazing, every single character is hot. Why is everyone hot? Anyways, aside from that, the gameplay is incredibly fun and satisfying. What I think really helps make the gameplay interesting for me is the combination of all the weapons you can use and all the boons you get from the gods creates so much variety that I never ran out of room for experimentation. You can do everything from cheesing it in the back with a bow to my personal favorite, using gauntlets for some up-close fun while dashing constantly like a hedgehog on cocaine. Hades is a really slick experience with some top-notch gameplay that has some really great writing and a surprisingly emotionally impactful through line, which motivates you to keep trying to break out of the underworld. Number 9. Growing up, I had access to a handful of different game consoles, but the one system I played probably more than any other was the Game Boy Advance. I brought that thing fucking everywhere. When I was a kid, I had this scratched up silver Game Boy Advance SP, and I damn near took that everywhere I could. Whenever I would be dragged somewhere, I'd constantly be playing it. I would be shuffling through the grocery store with my head straight down, paying attention to the Game Boy. One of the games I played the most has to be Fire Emblem Sacred Stones. Sacred Stones was my first introduction to the Fire Emblem series, and it very quickly became one of my favorites. I had Path of Radiance on the GameCube and Radiant Dawn on the Wii, but I don't know, there's just something about Sacred Stones that I just love. I'm not the biggest tactical player, but the low barrier to entry with the tactical RPG gameplay of Sacred Stones really drew me in. It was kind of almost like playing chess in a way, which I was super into when I was in middle school. I went to chess tournaments and everything. Anyways, the gameplay is standard early Fire Emblem built around the weapon triangle and some of that good old grid-based tactical RPG combat. The roster is filled with a bunch of great characters and pages of support conversations. One thing I really liked about Sacred Stones was the divergent storyline that happens about halfway through the game, which motivated me to replay the game to experience the other half. In terms of Fire Emblem protagonists, the twins are pretty basic, but some of the units you can recruit are some of my all-time favorites, like Best Boy Joshua. I mean, the dude joins your team because he lost a coin flip. That's some Sigma shit. Number 8. If there's one Game Boy Advance game I've put more hours into than Sacred Stones, it's Pokemon Emerald. Now, this might be a bit of a spicy take, but I genuinely think Gen 3 is the best Pokemon gen out of all generations. I adore Hoenn so much. It's one of the only Pokemon games where you actually have a father. Sure, he's an emotionally distant one, but he's still there. Aside from finally introducing your father, Gen 3 also introduced a lot of core Pokemon mechanics, such as abilities, weather, double battles, and it also completely overhauled the berry system. In regards to the region itself, it's also beautiful, and I love the tropical vibe shown off here. As someone who grew up on an island on the west coast, I love the diversity of the topography. You have islands, beaches, lush forests, but also mountains and a desert. I also really like that the whole right half of the map is basically a giant archipelago. No matter what IGN says, it is not too much water. I also found the villain teams to be quite compelling in this generation, especially compared to Team Rocket, who was just, we want to rule the world, rah, give us your stuff. They actually had lofty goals. Sure, they were stupid, and anyone with an ounce of critical thinking can understand that raising the water levels of the ocean is a bad idea, but at least it was something different rather than world domination for the millionth time. So many of the Pokemon introduced in this generation are some of my absolute favorites. The Lotad line will always be some of my favorites. Lotad is a derpy little friend, and Ludicolo is definitely hard carried by Mirror B from Pokemon Colosseum. That theme song is so damn groovy. It's also got one of my personal all-time favorite Pokemon with Absol, a cool as shit black and white cat dog thing with a sword on its head, and I'll admit, I think a big reason why I really like Absol is its storyline in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Red Rescue Team. Also, it just has one of the best Mega Evolutions, which special shout out to Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. They're easily the best Pokemon remakes out of all of them. That's right, I said it! Number 7. I'm not a very big horror game guy, not because I don't like being scared, it's just most of the time I'm not a super big fan of the common trope of disempowerment that a lot of horror games like to employ. So what's the solution to that? Well, make a horror game where you're a one-liner quipping action hero with a giant briefcase of weapons. Obviously, Resident Evil 4 isn't the scariest game ever made, but what makes Resident Evil 4 so good is that it's basically the video game equivalent of the Evil Dead movies. Resident Evil 4 has horrific monsters and some honestly genuinely scary scenes, like the one with the Verdugo. It's also wonderfully undercut with the best kind of camp. Leon is a goddamn action hero in this game, and I love it.
Hasta luego.
He gallivants into rural Spain to rescue the president's daughter completely alone with nothing but a supernaturally large briefcase and a bag of quips.
I've sent my right hand to dispose of you.
Your right hand comes off?
But at the same time as all this camp, the gameplay can be genuinely stressful at times. The opening village sequence is a masterclass in how to create a stressful opening segment in a video game. You're thrown right into the thick of it, and just when you think you have everything under control, you hear the revving of a chainsaw, and then you really start to panic. You don't know where all the items are, so you're running around trying to avoid this chainsaw-wielding, sack-wearing motherfucker, all while probably using up all of your ammo, desperately trying to find what little you can find, and just when you're about to be overwhelmed, the bell rings. And then while you're there, sweating, almost dead, trying to catch your breath, Leon has the gall to go, "Where's everyone going? Bingo?" It's amazing. What really helps this game is, while it can be absolutely ridiculous at times, it always takes itself seriously. Like, one of the major antagonists in this game is a little dude dressed like Napoleon who keeps calling you on your walkie-talkie just to talk shit. It's absurd and I love it. Number 6. There are only a handful of games that I love enough to get a tattoo of them. Pokemon, Zelda, Kingdom Hearts, but one that stands out is the .hack GU games. Originally a trilogy on the PS2, these are some of my absolute favorite PS2 games of all time. .hack GU is the sequel trilogy to the original .hack Saga, but with everything upgraded. It looks amazing for the PS2, and it has one of my favorite OSTs of all time. The track Gentle Hands makes me tear up every time I hear it, and the theme for Canard is a song I use in almost every single video I've ever edited. Taking place in a fictional MMORPG called The World, .hack is the anime progenitor of series like Sword Art Online and other takes place in a video game anime. Except, not shitty. You play as Haseo, a player who gets tricked by some PKers on his first day until he's saved by the coolest motherfucker Ovan, who invites him to his guild. One anime storyline later, his love interest Shino is killed by a mysterious player killer named Tri-Edge, and he decides the best thing to do is to become an edgelord player killer. The setting of the world is so cool, I genuinely wish it was an actual full-fledged virtual MMORPG like it's shown in the game. I would never not be playing it. I would have a serious problem. My friends and family would be worried for my well-being. But I wouldn't care because I have the world. I feel like it says a lot that I got so obsessed with this game series and its world that I have on 2 separate occasions ran Dungeons & Dragons campaigns within this setting that both lasted over a year. I adore this series, and when they announced an HD remaster collection with a new 4th volume, I foamed at the mouth. Number 5. I think it's time to talk about my favorite sandbox ever made. Sure, it's held together with scotch tape and a prayer, but Fallout New Vegas is one of the most multifaceted gaming experiences I've ever had. There are so many ways to approach this game, it's ridiculous. There's no one way to play this game. Want to be a God-fearing pacifist that talks your way through most conflicts? You can do that. Want to run a build where all you do is bash people's brains in with a shovel? You can do that. This game embodies the idea of a sandbox in the best way possible. Any and all goals in this game have a million different ways to play through them. You're never locked into one solution, and you're encouraged to experiment. A quest asks you to deal with an error made in a cannibal kitchen and a nosy father. Sure, you could just kill the father and you'll complete the quest, but you could also frame the father for the murder of his own son, or replace his kidnapped son with a different victim and release him and convince them that there's no hard feelings. The amount of branching quests in this game is ridiculous. Just look at this flowchart. If I knew how to read, it would be really impressive. And that's before talking about how well written this game is. Not only does it have some of the best dark humor, it's also got some of the best factions in any video game I've ever played. One of the biggest issues I have with Bethesda-led Fallout games is that it's very black and white with who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. In Fallout 3, the Brotherhood of Steel are clearly depicted as the knights in shining armor, the good guys. Meanwhile, the Enclave are the cartoonish evil bad guys seeking world domination. This is a very boring binary of who is good and who is bad. The beauty of New Vegas is that its factions are mired in the morally gray. The NCR on the surface might seem like the token good guy faction, but when you scrape the surface, you find a corrupt, incompetent bureaucracy that is spread way too thin, doesn't have the resources to support a nation of its size, and is colored with self-righteous hypocrisy that is one bad war away from complete and utter collapse. Then you have Mr. House, an egomaniacal capitalist overlord that cares for nothing beyond his Las Vegas strip and the ability to extract money from the pockets of drunk people, but has enough military power and forethought to establish significant stability. And then there's Caesar's Legion, which is the obviously most cartoonishly evil of all the factions, but there is a weird sense of order and structure within its tyranny. But it's only able to last so long as the charismatic leader Caesar is alive at the helm. All 3 major faction choices aren't what I would call a good choice, but that's what makes it compelling. You have to figure out what you think would be the best option for the Mojave, or say fuck it and rule everything yourself. Number 4. Okay, I swear this wasn't on purpose. At the start of writing this script, this game was 2 slots lower. That being said, the PS2 game I easily put the most hours into was Persona 4. I have put hundreds of hours into this game, which amounts to almost 2 full playthroughs. I love the Persona series, and while Persona 3 was my introduction, and Persona 5 is absolutely amazing, I have to give it to Persona 4, specifically Persona 4 Golden. I love Persona's mix of life simulator, dating simulator, JRPG, and dungeon crawler. It does not sound like it should work, but somehow it does. I love every aspect of this game. The cast of characters are great, minus Yosuke, and they all have compelling storylines dealing with all of their greatest insecurities, touching on some very real issues that people deal with growing up. It touches on everything from feelings of inadequacy, parental pressure, questioning your sexuality, and confronting hegemonic views of masculinity. The whole group of main characters are so believable as a group of friends that I wish I could hang out with them for real. There's a monster collecting mechanic in this game based around personas, with a bunch of varied and interesting monsters you can collect. The super interesting thing about these persona is a lot of them are based off of different cultures and their mythologies and literature. There were times where I would do nothing but read through the compendium entries of all the persona. The story is a well-written, intriguing murder mystery with some lighthearted JRPG slice of life thrown into the mix, with a twist that I definitely did not see coming the first time I played this game. The Persona games have so much replayability with all the different social links you can pursue that, unless you're using a guide, you're not likely to max them all out on a first playthrough, motivating you to play again and again to see everything. Number 3. If there's one game that gave me more nightmares as a kid than any other, it's Majora's Mask. This game traumatized me as a child, and I love it. I was never the biggest fan of Ocarina of Time. Sure, I found it good, but nothing mind-blowing. But when I played Majora's Mask for the first time, the mind-bending gameplay blew my mind. I know a lot of people weren't fans of the 3-day time cycle mechanic, but I always really liked it. It made you think about your schedule and how to best optimize a cycle to get the most done. The thing I love the most about this game is the atmosphere. From the very beginning, you're in a foggy forest when a sinister mask-wearing imp horsejacks you and steals your stuff. So you follow him down essentially a rabbit hole into a strange world populated with faces that are vaguely familiar but complete strangers. You deal with all the problems caused by the Skull Kid while exploring this strange and honestly disturbing as fuck world. Like, there is so much weird shit in this game. There's people living in toilets, crying masks, assassin ghosts that blow themselves up, and so much death. Like, this game is dark, like super dark for a kid's game, but just dark in general. My 12-year-old self was definitely not prepared to watch people panic and sob as they come to terms with the fact that they're about to die. The masks are definitely the highlight of the game. The main masks you collect through the game enable you to transform into the staple races of the Zelda franchise and use their specific abilities to progress. You can hop on water and fly with Deku Flowers as a Deku Scrub, roll around and walk on lava as a Goron, and swim and breathe underwater as a Zora. The Zora swimming in this game is so satisfying, and as a kid, I would boot up Majora's Mask just to swim around Great Bay as a Zora and do that for hours. And then Majora's Mask on the 3DS had to ruin it. Oh my god, don't get me started on the 3DS remake. Oh my god. Number 2. Now, when I think about games that have affected me the most on an emotional level, there is one clear winner. The Last of Us is a perfect game. This story is not only one of the best written video game stories I've ever experienced, but it's also just one of the best stories in any work of fiction, period, as evidenced by how goddamn well it got adapted to TV. Okay, yes, the gameplay is nothing to write home about, but it's not bad. It's good, but it's nothing really spectacular. But that doesn't really matter because the characters in this game are its heart and soul. Every character is so well written and carefully crafted that there are no throwaway side characters. There are no meaningless subplots. Every single character is important to the story. Even the supposed one-off side characters are some of the most developed and compelling characters I've ever experienced in a video game. But at its core, the beating heart of this game is the blossoming relationship between Joel and Ellie. As players, we experience the growth of their relationship side by side. We go from them barely being able to be in the same room with each other and Joel seeing Ellie as nothing more than cargo, all the way to tearfully embracing her after a traumatic event, calling her his baby girl. No game has ever made me cry as much as this video game. No story has ever made me cry this much. The first time I played through this game, it ruined me. Within the first half hour, I was sobbing. It's a true testament to how well this game is written and how well performed it is that I'm crying over a character that I've literally known for at most a half hour. This is a game that everyone needs to experience. It is the golden standard for emotionally affecting and compelling character writing, not just in video games, but in fiction in general. And here we are, number 1. So while I think in a more objective sense, The Last of Us is one of the greatest video games ever made, it's not my personal favorite. That honor goes to Skies of Arcadia, specifically the GameCube Director's Cut Skies of Arcadia Legends. I absolutely adore this video game. I probably played through it fully at least 15 times. And I'm still not sick of it. In fact, I make it a point to play through this game at least once every couple years. It's a must. I love this game so much that I've bonded with people and became friends with them over discovering their Twitch streams of this game. Skies of Arcadia is the only game category I follow on Twitch, and I will regularly check it to see who is streaming the game. I love it that much. In terms of its gameplay, it's a classic turn-based JRPG with a simple yet intuitive combat system built around a color elemental system, which honestly, to this day, I don't still fully understand. What makes this game stand apart from every other turn-based JRPG is the other major form of combat, ship battles. These battles are a great change of pace and offer an interesting twist on the classic formula. You have to manage a board of attacks, magic, repairs, and taking evasive action to ensure that you're able to defeat either the enemy ship or one of the various giant monsters you'll encounter in the skies. The soundtrack to this game is my personal all-time favorite. It's filled with absolute banger after banger. It has a slew of amazing battle tracks that I use in almost every single Dungeons & Dragons campaign I've ever run. All the towns and areas have unique and fitting music that exemplifies the locale and the people found within. The world is super interesting with various regions split up by a specific colored moon that shines over their region. You have a large desert region under the red moon, a lush jungle culture under the green moon, your classic JRPG bad guy empire under the yellow moon, and so many more. All the regions feel fleshed out and unique, and it really adds to the adventurous feel this game does so well. The world exploration in this game is done beautifully. The skies feel populated, and every now and then you'll encounter someone flying through the skies. Sometimes friendly, other times wanting to murk you. There's discoveries hidden all over the world, unique monsters to battle in your ship, and a bounty system that'll have you hunting down some of the hardest boss fights in the game. Whenever I play this game, I feel like I'm going on an adventure. I've played this game so many times, and I keep coming back to it. And there you have it, my top 20 favorite video games of all time. Hopefully you agreed with at least some of my takes. Let me know in the comments below what some of your favorite games of all time are. And thank you so much for watching my first attempt at long form content. Still trying to find my voice. Hopefully I get better with time. And thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye. And there's Burb. Wow! You know how hard it is to record audio with a Thank you for watching.